Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation. This is a humanist perspective on theological questions. The last couple of weeks, I've been asking a very old religious question: to whom and to what are we accountable? To whom and to what are we accountable? Well, I've given you some answers by a couple of the rock star theologians of U.S. Christian history. We've had Reinhold Niebuhr, who called himself a Christian realist, and the Christian pragmatist Cornel West. So a question that is a basis for theological thought is, does a providential God control human history? Definitely, Reinhold Niebuhr said absolutely. Human history is in the control of a God who is directing that history. Cornel West is a little bit more foggy on that. Maybe kinda is his answer. But you know what? We humanists are going to say, no, that's not happening. Another good question: why do bad things happen to good people? Well, Reinhold Niebuhr would answer, people are not actually good. They're sinful and fallen in some way. And I think Cornel West would have to go with that ultimately, because it is the central Christian answer. Another one is to teach everyone a lesson. That's a little more of the conservative Christian side of things. Well, we humanists tend to say bad things happen to everybody. It has nothing to do, again, with a providential God, with sin or redemption or salvation or any of those things. Today, I want to talk a little bit about a more humanist theologian, contemporary, Sharon D. Welsh. She's a social ethicist, an academic, a Unitarian Universalist, and a senior fellow of the Institute for Humanist Studies. Dr. Welsh describes visionary pragmatism as an alternative to utopian thinking or cynicism and despair. She talks about microtopias rather than utopias. So I've talked about Christian realism, I've talked about Christian pragmatism, and here we have a humanist theology of visionary pragmatism. Well, what's that all about? Dr. Welsh's newest book is After the Protests Are Heard, Enacting Civil Engagement and Social Transformation. Kirkus Reviews says more of a call to reason than a call to arms. The book offers hope in the face of great challenges. So Dr. Welsh is definitely on the side of let's look at the real social issues of today and how people actually act in the world. Again, that's going back to the Niebuhrian idea of really looking at the facts on the ground. Another of her books are called After Empire, The Art and Ethos of Enduring Peace. You can do a little bit of searching around on the web and find out more about Sharon Welsh and her books. She looks really at social ethics, as again does Niebuhr, but from a very different viewpoint. And she's living in our own time, watching the same news as us. Her first book was called Sweet Dreams in America, Making Ethics and Spirituality Work. In that book, she says, the wellspring of decency is loving this life in which people die, people suffer, there are limits, and we make mistakes. The wellspring, then, of moral action is not utopia, not a counterfactual vision, not a declaration that the world could and should be otherwise. Rather, it is a deep affirmation of the joy, richness, and blessing that the world is. You can see how that is very pragmatic, very humanist. This is the world we live in. There's nothing counterfactual about it. There's no magical ending coming. There's no magic that's coming into the world to change the direction of human events. In another book, she says, the ground of challenging exploitation, injustice, and oppression is not a vision of how the world could be or will be in the future reign of God or after the revolution. The ground of challenging injustice is gratitude, the heartfelt desire to honor the wonder of that which is, to cherish, to celebrate, to delight in the many gifts and joys of life. So she's going from the one side of things, the future reign of God. That's not happening, according to humanists. The revolution, that some kind of a Marxist or fascist revolution that would change all of human nature, not going to happen, not likely. So what are we going to do in the real world with the real facts of how we are actually going to live? Injustice, she says, in a one of her, I think probably her central book still is a book called A Feminist Ethics of Risk. She has done a new edition of that book, and probably it's the way to start if you're really interested in reading some serious theology. But Dr. Welch is good in that she's not one of those theologians who throws around these huge terms and doesn't define them. So it's a read for most of us. In A Feminist Ethics of Risk, she says this: injustice can be eliminated, but human conflicts and natural limitations cannot be removed. The conflicts of social life and the limitations of nature cannot be controlled or transcended. They can, however, be endured and survived. It is possible for there to be a dance with life, a creative response to its intrinsic limits and challenges. So, yes, we should be out there fighting injustice, but the fact is, this injustice is going to go down maybe, but then human conflict, the natural limitations of being human, those aren't going away. It's going to continue in human history to be a struggle to act in an ethical and moral manner. And again, no magic, no God from the machine is going to fix that. It's just what we've got to deal with here. She also says love for others leads us to accept accountability in contrast to feeling guilt. You see how accountability is very humanist in contrast to guilt, which is a very religious, monotheistic way of looking. Love for others leads us to accept accountability in contrast to guilt and motivates our search for ways to end our complicity with structures of oppression. Solidarity does not require self-sacrifice, but an enlargement of the self to include community with others. And that's something I talk a lot about at First Unitarian Society, is how to get out of the I ego and into some kind of communal life, congregational life, and the larger human constructs in which we create conversation. So the question, to whom and to what are we accountable? Well, we humanists will say to each other, and that means everybody in our global village, and to the earth and its living things. No, we're not accountable ultimately to something we don't see, something counterfactual, but rather to what we do see and experience around us. And that's the humanist answer. Next week, I do want to go into a new idea about theology and look at it from a humanist and also monotheistic perspective, and that is, where is the human in all this? And where we're going to start there is the Greek idea of anthropos. It is where we get a few words, and we'll be looking at that. And anthropos tends to be the term that's used in theological circles anyway. Thanks a lot for listening this week. A big thank you for financial support to Anita Martinez and Marcy Lessler and Ren Nippling. Tomorrow morning, Friday morning, 9 a.m., you can join us. If you would like the Zoom link, email me, minister@firstunitarian.org. Thanks a lot for listening this week, and back next week to consider what is the human in all this. Thank you.